All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free, 1-800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com on all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And our main website where you can listen to the X Zone Radio Show 724, 365 at www.xzoneradiotv.com. And to all our Canadian listeners who are celebrating Thanksgiving this weekend, a happy Thanksgiving to one and all. X Zone Nation, my guest this hour is a lady I've had the pleasure of having on the show in the past, and it's great having her back with us again here in the X Zone. Her name is Judika Illes, and she fell in love with the magical arts as a child and has been studying them ever since. An independent scholar, her interests include tarot and other forms of divination, astrology, spellcasting, witchcraft, amulets, traditional healing, and spirituality, Kabbalah and Egyptian mysteries, runes, magical oils and perfumes, mythology, folklore, and fairy tales. Judika is the author of the Encyclopedia of Witchcraft, the Encyclopedia of 5,000 Spells, the Encyclopedia of Spirits, Pure Magic, a complete course in spellcasting, Magic When You Need It, the Weezer Field Guide to Witches, and the Encyclopedia of Mystics, Saints, and Spirits. She is also the author of the Weezer Field Guide to the Paranormal, published under the alias Judith Joyce. Once again, Judika Illes is my guest. Her website is www.judikailles.com. And Judika, welcome back to the X Zone. It's a great pleasure having you back here, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much. As I was saying, I love your show so much, as a listener and as a guest.
Oh, now, and as I told you before, stop making me blush. So let me see, Judika. You and I were talking a bit before we went on air. We were just catching up over the years that we've had the pleasure of knowing you here in the X Zone. Where did all this interest come from? I know it says as a child, but what was it that catapulted young Judika Illes into the writing author expert that she is today?
My sister, I am the youngest child. My sister, there's a big gap between us. She's 12 years older than I am. So when I was 6, she went off to college. And when she went to college in New York City, she went to Cooper Union, which at that time was across the street from one of the rare metaphysical bookstores in the world. And she would bring home stuff, astrology books, tarot cards. And every night when she'd come home, I'd mug her. And I would just take, who's to say, where did the interest come from? Why does one child love sports and another child loves to dance? I read very early. My mother taught herself English by teaching me how to read.
Yes.
So I was a really early reader. And I had a family of adults who never stopped me from reading anything. They didn't hand it to me, but they didn't stop me either. And so whatever my sister brought home, I just took it and I read it and I consumed it. And I have a good memory, and it's stuck. And it really has been my lifelong pursuit. It's love, passion. Who knows? Who knows where it comes from?
I fully understand the analogy you just gave me about, why do some children like sports and others don't? Well, I understand that, and I'll tell you why. Because my brother, at a very young age, my younger brother, developed this love for hockey. And the love for hockey that he had was the goaltender. Yeah. And he would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and Dad would have to go down to the arena, and they'd play, and, all this stuff. And first of all, I couldn't see myself getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. number one. Number two, getting cold on purpose wasn't in my way of thinking. Number three, playing hockey, well, that's okay, but not to be the guy that everybody targets pucks at.
Yeah.
So,
I know.
I just decided to play guitar like yourself, read books, study, and plan my future. So I fully understand that, and I, for one, am very happy, and I'm sure that your readers around the world are happy as well, that this is what happened to our Judika, because we love her books.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm blushing.
There you go. Judika, you and I have to take a commercial break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. X-Zone Nation. Judika Illes is our guest this hour. Her website is www.judikailles.com. That's JUDIKAILLES.com. And you know what? We'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, I'm asking everyone around the world to go to www.stopebolapetition.com. We want the Canadian government to deny people from entering Canada, even getting on aircraft to Canada from the countries that are stricken with Ebola. Only until the quarantine period of 21 days is over, and then once Health and Welfare Canada and doctors agree that they've passed, and they are no longer a threat to Canada, let them back in. We'll be back. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. My very special guest this hour is Judika Illes. Her website is www.judikailles.com. Judika, this is October. This is the month of the ghouls. This is the month of pumpkins, witches. It's the month that dentists look for all year around because they know kids are going to get cavities, and family practitioners know that their moms are going to be bringing their little pumpkins to them because of the sugar blitzes. But witches, ghouls, spooks, now these are things you write about.
Yes, I do.
Let me ask you, according to you, an expert, what is a witch?
That is a very, very, very good question. And, it seems like such a straightforward question, but there are so many definitions. For most people, and it would be close to my definition, a witch is a spellcaster or a magic user. The word witch itself derives from an Anglo-Saxon root word that is related to words like wise and wisdom. And when you hear, if you read stories about wise women, it's a euphemism for witches. This indicates someone who has special knowledge of the earth and the secret powers of the earth. But there are a lot of other people, and you have to be careful because there are people who use that word. The word witch is also used for someone who is an adherent of the Wiccan religion. It is used by people who think that witches are a special species, like, as if the TV show Bewitched was real, and there are just these, they look like people, but they walk among us, but they're not really. And there are people who do take that very seriously. There are people who believe that witches are worshippers of the devil and, eat babies. And there are people who use it as an insult for women who don't know their place.
That's crazy because I find it very ironic that whenever somebody mentions a witch, like you were just saying, it has to be a female, and it's kind of got a negative connotation. Yet Merlin the wizard, he was revered.
There's a joke there.
Is it because
there's actually a joke?
There is.
There's a little bit of, it's an irony, maybe more than a joke, because the word witch derives from an Anglo-Saxon root word that has a male and a female variant. And the word we use for witch now that people associate with women is actually the male variant. So
seems a little sexist.
Yes, And there are certainly many male witches throughout history. The most famous witches have been male because if only because women have historically been so anonymous. Merlin and Faust. And Faust is based on a real person. Agrippa, who also a historical person.
The Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz.
There you go.
That's right.
The Wizard of Oz was great, and then Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. But mind you, Glenda was a nice witch, so what the heck, eh?
I don't think she was that nice.
Glenda?
I really don't. No, she sets the whole thing up. She's the one who tells Dorothy to go get the shoes.
Ah.
Or who actually puts the shoes on her feet. I mean, if you think about it, if you think about it very neutrally, without judgment, the Wicked Witch of the West, her sister has died. I mean, if your sister has died, who inherits the property?
Oh, that's
if you have
it.
no other family.
That's it. I'm never going to watch that again. I'll never let my grandkids see it again. That's
I'm
it.
sorry, I ruined it.
No, you didn't ruin it. You brought a point home, and I love that about you. All right, we were talking about witchcraft and Wicca. What's the difference?
Modern Wicca is an earth-centered religion that is based on the teachings of the late Gerald Gardner. It has its own holidays and practices. Witchcraft is based on folk traditions from all around the world. There isn't any place where there isn't some kind of witchcraft, even if it's been suppressed. Wicca is based on traditions from Northern and Western Europe mainly. Witches follow all kinds of religions, and there are Christian witches and Jewish witches and atheist witches. There are witches who have no religion.
Holy cow.
Wiccans might be witches, but not all witches are Wiccans.
Gotcha. Over the years doing the show, I've met witches, Wiccans, both on the show and at different events, and they're really nice people.
Of course.
Yeah, they're really nice people.
There are good people everywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
There are good people everywhere, and there are, creepy, unpleasant people everywhere. I don't know that anybody has a monopoly.
Is there a difference between white magic and black magic?
I'm going to ruin that too. There are value judgments put on colors that are, I think, dangerous. People, when they say, I'm a witch, but I'm a white witch, what they mean is I'm a good witch, I'm a harmless witch. But because the color white is not synonymous with good. If you go to India, it's associated with death and shrouds. The corpse bride wears, her white shroud. In ancient Egypt, what we call black magic was known as red magic. So there are just, there are associations of values with colors. And for me, I think it's dangerous because it implies that black is bad. And, I don't know that we want to go there. Black is bad, white is good. There is benevolent practices that are intended to help people, and then there are angry, destructive people who use whatever tools they have at hand to harm other people. And for some people, those will be magical practices. Other people, will use their own weapons. But it's really from what is inside the person. It's not the practice, it's the person.
What about the spells? Do spells really work?
Well, I do have a book with 5,000 spells in it. Yes, actually, often they do work. Not always. They're not a chemistry experiment. It's not like you buy a box of mac and cheese, and if you follow the ingredients, follow the directions on the back, you will get, it's pretty predictable. You will get what the picture tells you, and the picture in the box will tell you that you will get. A spell, yeah, they do work a lot of the time, and that's why so many of them have lasted for thousands of years. It is using a type of energy, and that's what witches know. There's all sorts of energies in the world that maybe we can't quantify yet. And the example I always give is that, they didn't know about nuclear power a couple hundred years ago.
True.
Who would have imagined? When Marie Curie and Pierre Curie were, trying to derive nuclear power, radioactivity, people laughed at them. Other scientists laughed at them. So until they could prove it. And so there's all sorts of, the concept of ley lines, which some people may be familiar with, that there are energies in the earth, these geo energies, all these sorts of things.
But you
that
see,
are we haven't proven them yet, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist.
But you see, anyone with a basic sense of science would know that the possibility of ley lines and how they work has been scientifically proven. Well,
there are people who, I guess, how much proof does someone need? Different people have different perspectives. I can tell you that, I have seen spells work. I'm not, when I write a book, I write it with sincerity. So it doesn't work every time, and there are factors why a spell might not work. So I think there's the tendency for people who, try to cast their first spell and it didn't work, for them to sort of throw out the baby with the bathwater. Yeah. But the example I give for that is like headache remedies. If you try one brand and it doesn't work, do you just assume that all pharmaceuticals don't work? Or do you look for the one that works for you? Because there's a lot of personalizing, finding the spells that work for you, making sure you're doing them right. And a lot of doing them right means paying attention, because we live in a world of multitasking. You're on the phone, you're doing, you're on the treadmill, you're doing 12 things at once, and that's not conducive for a spell to work. It's an old school skill. You have to pay attention.
In our world of modern day technology, how has the internet and all the television shows and all the movies pertaining to witches, to vampires, to werewolves, how has that affected the reality, the core of what we're talking about?
In some ways, it has brought tolerance, and I'm thinking of Samantha and Bewitched, who I think was, who is charming and beautiful and essentially good, and has problems that everyone can relate to. There's that, I think she was very sympathetic, and she made a lot of people reassess what it meant to be a witch. There's also, I get a lot of email from, and I love Charmed. Not a criticism of the show,
right?
But people who watch it and don't, a magic spell on television has to have a visual effect, because it's a TV show. How will you know it worked?
That's right.
So I get emails from people who, or Buffy the Vampire Slayer is another one. You cast a spell, and if the spell works, there'll be, smoke and lights. And when they cast a spell at home, there wasn't smoke and lights. And so did it work? And so there's that, because people are no longer learning from other people. They're learning in isolation from books. They're learning from watching television. And what is on television has to work as a TV show. I
agree with you, and that's why they call television the boob tube.
Well, it's fun.
Yeah, it is.
It's fun, but you're not going to get those kind of, you're not going to get the colored smoke at home in your kitchen, unless you're producing that, independently.
That's right. Judika, please stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exo Nation Judika Illes is my special guest this hour. www.judikailles.com, and we'll be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away, and don't forget to go to www.stopebolapetition.com. We'll be back. Don't go away. Hey, Craig, what are you going dressed out as on Halloween? Oh, there's something original. You've got to understand, Exonation, that Craig is going out dressed as ZZ Top. He looks like ZZ Top in real life. I think Craig could get a job on Duck Dynasty, for goodness sake. That's why I love this guy so much. He's sitting over there with a big smile on his face saying, thank you. No problem, Craig. No, Laura's working this Halloween, so I am at home, and I will be handing out the trick-or-treats to all the little ghouls and goblins who come to our home. But, with my sinister laugh, I am going to put sound effects up the stairs as they keep coming up the stairs, different sound effects. And then I think I'm going to wear my Santa Claus outfit, giving out candy. Now, if that doesn't screw them up, nothing will. Yeah, well, what can I say? Exonation, our guest this hour is Judika Illes, and we're talking about witches. She has a wonderful new book entitled Encyclopedia of Witchcraft. And is your book a celebration of witchcraft?
I think so. I mean, I have loved witches since I was tiny. Halloween, I've always dressed up as a witch. But, if you want to sell me something, put a witch on it. and witches have been used in advertising precisely for that reason. But, makeup ads and I have framed pictures of Strega liqueur ads, which Strega in Italian is a witch. So there's red witch cheese, which is in the stores at this time of year.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But let me ask you something. Why in movies, older movies, I should say, in books...
newer ones, too.
Really? Why are they ugly?
I think so.
Why are they ugly?
Well...
why do they
witches have a bad reputation I think to discourage people I think at the heart from discouraging people, from women, from becoming witches, from discouraging people, including men, from associating with witches, and that's a whole story. Also because, after generations and generations of seeing ugly witches, a lot of people assume that's the only kind of witch there is, very similar to all sorts of prejudices. And also, one of the roots of this is people, when witches and witches throughout Europe with very, very, very few exclusions, for centuries in some places, there was persecution of people who were accused of being witches. Whether or not they were actually witches, it's not really relevant, but they were accused and when they were burned or hung or however they would be killed, there is a theatrical aspect to it. Anne Rice, in one of the Mayfair witches books, has a scene of a witch burning in France, and it's very, very historically accurate as she describes it. People would come out to see, and possibly people didn't have a choice. In the same way that in some countries, people are forced to go vote for, the one candidate. Mm-hmm. You can't not. The bus comes and picks you up, and you have to go. And, and they would bring the witch out, and, that was the witch. And by the time the witch made her appearance, her head had been shaved, all the hair in her body had been removed. She had been, tortured, beaten up. In some cases, and you'll see this, there is an Ingmar Bergman movie called The Seventh Seal that has, as one of the subplots, a young woman about to be burned as a witch. They would break their hands so they couldn't cast spells on people, couldn't curse the people who killed them. And by the time people saw them, I'm sure they were horrifying.
Well, who was the root of all this evil? Was it the church?
It goes back earlier than that. I mean, it's very easy to say, it's all the church. Mm-hmm. But in fact, the Roman Empire was not a particularly magic-friendly society either, before they were Christian. I think it has to do with authority. I think the more authoritarian a society, mm-hmm. the less tolerant they are of practitioners of the magical arts. It's a bit of a canary in a coal mine, and it's something to pay attention to. 2009, the government of Saudi Arabia created a council to ferret out witches that is very similar to the Inquisition. They didn't have one like that before. So this thing, in my theory, witches and the practice of witchcraft in terms of magical practice, people are very independent. Independent people who like to take care of things themselves, not necessarily great with authority, not necessarily obedient. I think the real issue is not that witches are, evil, but that witches are not obedient. And, in the same way that when, in years past, when during colonial era, the first thing the rulers would do would be to round up the shamans, because the shamans are also that kind of independent thinking that isn't necessarily going to go along with what everyone, with what the authority wants you to do. What is a magic spell? It's an attempt to make your life better. Now, it's not inclined to wait for, the 5-year plan. Oh, yes, everything will be better in 5 years. Everything will be better when you get to heaven. Everything will be better in the next life. It's that desire to have things better now and to attempt to fix it for yourself. So there's a kind of a mindset there that I think is not attractive to authorities. And I think that's really the root of it.
Wow. What are some of the dangers of witchcraft?
Well, there are several. One of them is for people, depending where you are, is for people to think you're a witch, because although there are many countries where you can be free to practice and walk around wearing a pentacle or whatever your practice is, there are also many places. In often accusations of witchcraft derive from property disputes. There are often there's often a financial basis for why one party will accuse another party of being a witch. And we see this now in rural India, throughout Africa. There are thousands of children who have been accused of being witches and are, and cannot go home. They've been turned out. So that is the primary danger. The other danger is that people are very afraid of witches. There are still many people, and you can't, I can say that they're not evil, but there are many people who are afraid. And that fear is very real. They're both afraid. They're afraid that someone will curse them, that someone knows more than they do, that someone will, if they make someone angry, they will retaliate by creating bad luck for them. And these are very, very ancient concerns. And there are actually all sorts of solutions for them and protections and preventions. And the book has a number of them. But the problem now in 2014 is people are also embarrassed. They're embarrassed to have these fears. They feel silly. They feel embarrassed. It's backward and superstitious, and everyone knows that these things can't happen, and yet they're afraid. And so people don't discuss these things. And so the sort of thing that someone's great-great-grandmother would tell her children, it's not being passed down anymore. But there are all sorts of simple protections, if you are afraid, to make sure that someone will not, the root of this is really not to spend time with angry people, because you don't have to know how to cast a spell to do it. You just have to be it's that emotion. You have to be angry and jealous and resentful. And that sort of person sort of radiates a negative energy that will probably not have a good effect on anyone near them. The other danger is a scam. Because people don't talk about these things. It's really, I read about these things and people tell me the same scams being played out over and over and over again because people are embarrassed and they won't talk about them. So it leaves people very vulnerable to con artists. Whether or not these con artists are witches, they don't have to be. The important thing is that they're a con artist.
I've spoken to police officers, both on air and off air, and
Bunker Squad.
Exactly, bunco fraud, and they're the first ones to say that they know people are getting taken by these con artists, but unless the person actually goes to the station or calls and files a complaint, their hands are tied.
Can I tell you one? Because
Sure,
people
please.
should know this one.
Yeah.
Because this one is done over and over again. You're nervous about something. Be careful of like the $10 psychic, and there are probably many good ones, but within that, because it's a lure to draw you in. If something sounds too good to be true,
Exactly.
it is. There's a professional rate. You wouldn't go to a $10 lawyer necessarily. I mean, you might if you needed information, but then you would get a second opinion, and it's the same thing. You should have standards for this. They will tell you that your money is cursed, but they can fix it. And what you have to do is but it's an old school skill, and so they need cash. What you have to do is you have to empty out your bank accounts, get those cash bills and put them in a pillowcase, and then bring it to them, and they will do some sort of a ritual, and your money will be cleansed, and you can put it back into the bank. But it's a sleight of hand trick. At some point, you will leave with a pillowcase that does not have your cash.
Oh, my gosh.
It has something of equal value. It is a really, really, really old scam from before there were banks. It happens all the time.
So they leave with an empty
people
pillowcase?
Don't tell other people. Yeah, well, you go home and you've got I don't know, Monopoly money, or you've got cotton balls, or you've got something that when you pick up the bag, it's not obviously empty, but it's worthless.
And I would imagine they say don't open the bag until you get home.
Of course, you have to take a circuitous route home. You have to do all kinds of things. You have to expose it to the moonlight. Don't open it. There's all kinds of things. And by the time you open it, depending on how much money's in it, first of all, it's your word against someone else's. Second of all, if there's enough money, they may be gone.
That's right. So,
people who bring you in and tell you that they can remove the curse, but you have to buy hundreds of dollars of candles from them. You can light your own candles. You don't have to pay someone. You can light your own candles.
Yeah, or if you want, and if you don't want to buy any candles, just go to your local church and light a few there. There you go.
You can light a few there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What about the connection between witches and fairies, gnomes, elves? Are there any connections there?
Yeah, very specifically with fairies. In Europe, throughout Europe, Italy, Scotland, the Balkans, Hungary, people have a vision of witches as devil worshippers, but in fact, in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries, they may have been fairy worshippers. There was this tremendous, and still in some places you have the fairy faith. In Ireland and the Balkans, you have fairy doctors, people who claim to have received their knowledge of healing directly from the fairies. Women, and there are trial transcripts, Hungary and Italy specifically, there are trial transcripts, and you can read them, of women who are accused of witchcraft and arrested. And they would answer the questions put to them, and many of them had to do with fairies. They went dancing with the fairies. The fairy tale of the 12 dancing princesses who wear out their shoes, I always think that they're describing these fairy balls. And the queen of the fairies came, and she was beautiful, and she brought them food, and she brought them gifts, and if they venerated her, she would take care of them. And what you would see in these transcripts is the inquisitors. And at this point, we are talking about the church. The inquisitors were bored. They were theologians. They did not want to discuss fairies. They wanted to discuss Satan.
But these theologians discuss angels.
Yeah. But angels, I guess, for them were not fairies. There's a case of Isabel Gowdy, who apparently volunteered a confession of witchcraft in Scotland. It's a rare case, but a famous case. And they start off discussing fairies, and then the theologians and the inquisitors start asking them questions, and the implication is that they've been tortured, and pretty quickly they start talking about Satan instead. It's very interesting.
Well, let's see. Fairies fly, angels fly, fairies do magic, angels. I don't understand the bias and the way that one philosophy has to be better than the next. Let's just live together, learn from each other.
Absolutely.
And appreciate and grow together, because the more information...
Do you know the legend about the fairies? I mean, there is I think it's an Irish Catholic legend that, who are the fairies, because they're not in the Bible. And the fairies were the angels who were cast out of heaven, but they weren't bad enough to go to hell. They weren't good enough to stay in heaven. And so here they are on earth with us.
Well, I'm glad they're here with us. Stand by, Judika. You and I have to take our final break for this hour. A great hour. Time always goes by so fast when you're with us. Exonation, Judika Illes is our guest this hour. www.judikailles.com. That's JUDIKAILLES.com. And Judika and I will be back on the other side of this brief commercial break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. www.judikailles.com. We'll be back. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Judika Illes is my guest this hour. www.judikailles.com. First of all, Judika, as always, it's been a great pleasure having you on the show. I love your books. I love having you on the show. We'll have to have you back on in the very near future.
Thank you. I love being here. Thank you so much.
It's a great pleasure for us. And somebody was asking me, they heard something about witch blood. And I was wondering if you'd tell me what that is.
The theory is, and it's a very modern theory, that if you recall from the book of Exodus, the Genesis, the angels, the rebel angels who came to earth and had relations with human women, well, they had offspring, and those offspring had offspring, and the theory is the witches are the descendants of that union of angels and people, women, people. Humans, and the theory is what people want. Do you know how now you can you can do genetic testing and they can tell you your percentage of Neanderthal ancestry? Mm-hmm. There are people who are hoping that someday soon they will be able to determine your percentage of angelic ancestry. The theory is that type of ancestry is what gives some people extra power and perhaps a disobedient, rebellious nature also.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Rebellious behavior. Well, geez, I've got a few ideas on why a lot of kids these days are rebellious. It's because their parents don't take time to be parents. Oh.
But you can blame the angels.
Come on, guys. It seems to me that even though we're in the year 2014, there are times when we think like Neanderthals. We just can't accept responsibility. And I understand that we live in a binary existence where we have 0 and 1. But you also have up and down, right and left, good and evil. And it seems that even in today's society, we like to blame evil for the downfalls that we as humans are responsible for. We pass the buck. And I think this is what happened throughout history when it's come to the practitioners that we know who are very peace-loving people, who, in fact, the witches were the first pharmacists because they knew Mother Earth. Exactly. Right. They were the first botanists, for goodness sake. And
the earliest healers.
And we forget the good parts. And it's because of people like you and the great books you write that this truth comes out. And I would just want to thank you once again for joining us. Always a great pleasure. Let our listeners know where they can buy copies of your book.
Oh, wherever fine books are sold. Look online. On my website, there are links to various sellers. And if you have an independent retailer you like, ask them to order books for you. Tell them what you want, because a lot of independent stores they can't really afford to keep tons of books on their shelves, but they'll be happy to sell you a book if you tell them which one you want.
And you can always just say, visit www.judikaillis.com. And if you can't understand what I'm saying, it's www.judikailles.com. There you go. Judika, take care of yourself, my dear friend. Please come back and visit us soon. And to you and yours,
thank you so much, Rob.
A very happy Halloween.
You too. Thank you.
And I believe the witches say, Merry meet.
Merry meet.
Take care of yourself, friend. Exo Nation, Judika Illis has been our guest this hour. www.judikaillis.com. I'll be back on the other side of the news at 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, I'd love to hear from you. Send me your emails, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. We'll be back after this break at 6.5 minutes past. Don't go away.